So hi guys, I'm going to show you now how to present a PPT to your clients. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at this instruction, we're going to use this. I won't go into the obvious details of filling in names and addresses, etc. This is the presentation that I'm going to do. Now the first thing to say is, you know that I don't like just seeing a client and start filling out a form. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look first of all at the family tree and the assets and liabilities, and then I'm going to do the presentation. So what I would do here is I get my form out. Of course I talk to the client first of all, and then I'd say, okay, I'm about to present. So then what I would do, I would use this form, and I'm going to show you how I would do that. Okay, so we're now going to look at the presentation. So we have our client instruction here, and the first thing I say is what I'd like to do, Jim and Jan. So the client's Jim and Jan Jones. What I'd like to do is first you'll have a look at your assets and liabilities, and then your family tree, and then you can tell me what you'd like to do. So at this stage, I'll turn to the asset and liability page. I won't fill this in, it's self-explanatory. I've put in the assets and liabilities. That will tell me whether they own a house, what sort of monies they've got, and then I'll fill in the family tree. And I'll just briefly show you this. I've pre-filled it in, but I would say, okay, so Jim, I'd write in Jim as client 1, you're married to Jan, client 2, and how many children have you got between you? And they say, yep, we've got Jack, Jill and Ben and their prospective ages. And I would just confirm those children are bloodline to you both, and that's because they're connected to this line. I then ask how many grandchildren they've got and whether they've been married before. So here Jim has, so I tick the box, Jan hasn't. And if there's any other previous children, because of course they would be step here to Jan, not bloodline, and we need to know that. Once that's filled out, I go to the back of the form, the blank back sheet, and I go, okay, is it fair to assume that if one of you passes away, everything passes to the survivor? So that's what we call a basic will, and I really don't like them, and let me show you why. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about estate planning. Now, estate planning consists of 3 parts. Firstly, making a will, and I think we all know that making a will allows you to pass your assets through to your loved ones. Secondly, I'm going to talk about trust, how to protect those assets, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And thirdly, I'll talk about lasting powers of attorney. Now, this is why you're alive, but you're unable to conduct your affairs. Now, they come in 2 parts. Firstly, one for finances, and secondly, one for health. And you appoint attorneys to act on your behalf when you can't. And typically, they will be your spouse and your children. Now, to put all of this estate planning in place is about the cost of a holiday. The only difference is when you fly away to Spain or Portugal, wherever you went last year, when you land back, obviously the holiday's a bit of a distant memory, but you're thinking, where am I going next year? And more importantly, how can I pay for it? With estate planning, other than a few tweaks, once it's paid for, it's paid for. You never pay again. Now, you can say to me today, Tim, I'd like to put the full estate plan in place. I want to put part of it, or I want to put none of it, and it's entirely up to you. However, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you a couple of things, and you can say a number of things to me. Hopefully it will be, yes, Tim, we love it, we see the advantages, we want to go ahead. And we would love that. And if it is a yes from you, then can I just say, from my perspective and from the company's, we will do everything we can to support you, not only now, but also in the future as far as your wills and estate plans are concerned. But it might not be a fit for you, and that's fine, that'll be a no, but please do me the courtesy of not saying you want to think about it, because you and me know that that's a no. Okay, so let me show you how this works. Okay, so let's have a look at your main asset, which is your house. Now, you own it jointly, so we've got Jim and Jan. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at an example as where Jan dies first. It would be exactly the same if Jim died, but here Jan dies first. So under this basic will, remember the one I said I didn't like, Jan has passed the house and everything to Jim. Now on the face of it, that looks fine, but Jim lives another 35 years. He meets a young lady, not unreasonably, and they get married. Now, obviously she's not as good as Jan, it doesn't work out, and they get a divorce. Can you see this half of the house that Jan thought was going to the children goes in a divorce settlement to the young lady? Now, less likely, but Jim could go into business and go bankrupt. And because the whole house is now owned by Jim, it's the whole house that can be taken by bankruptcy courts. And finally, he could go into care when he's older. Because he owns the house, it's the whole house that's assessed for care costs. And the crying shame is that all the time Jan thought that half was going to the children, and it never needs happen. And it would be the same, of course, if Jim died first. And actually it gets worse, and the reason being is that Jan, 6 years before she died, she had a stroke, and what it meant is she couldn't get up the stairs. So the family had a meeting and said, let's move to a bungalow. The only problem is, of course, she couldn't sign the documents, and therefore the move couldn't go ahead. So the only option for the family was to go to the Court of Protection, and that cost thousands of pounds and took months and months to sort out. And again, this never need happen. So what could these guys do about it? Well, remember the house here. The first thing that Jan could do is make a will. And in this will is a particular trust called a Protective Property Trust. And this in effect ring fences her half of the house. So when she dies, her half of the house goes into the trust, and it's in favour of the 3 children. Now the first thing that Jim will say is, well, hang on a minute, where can I live? Well, under the terms of the trust, he has a right to live in the house, he has a right to move, he can live in it for the rest of his life, but he never owns it. So now let's have a look. When he meets his young lady, he lives for 35 years, meets his young lady, it doesn't work out and he gets divorced. Can you see he's never owned this half? It's owned by the trust, and therefore it won't go in a divorce settlement. It would be exactly the same if he went bankrupt, or indeed if he went into care. Because he doesn't own it, he can't lose it, and on his death it's guaranteed to go to the children. Can you see the huge advantages of good estate planning? And if we look at our scenario 6 years earlier, poor old Jan had a stroke and she couldn't get up the stairs, so the family decided to move to the bungalow. Well, of course the move could go ahead. Why? Because what she could do is make a lasting power of attorney for her finances and one for her health and welfare. So now when she needs to sign, although she can't, she hasn't got the capacity to do it, her attorneys, i.e. her spouse and children, they can, and the move can go ahead. So what does estate planning do? It allows you to pass your main asset, your house, through safely to your children and the generations. Now I'm going to talk about the full lifetime estate plan. It consists of a will, a trust, and 2 lasting powers of attorney. Now let me just ask you, Jim and Jan, how much is your house worth? It's worth 400,000. Well, the great news is that for just £995 per person, you can put all this plan in place. Can you see the huge advantages and the peace of mind such planning will give you? And that is the end of the presentation. My name's Tim Hurd, and we look forward to seeing you do this presentation.